Hi coders, so we are now moving into our CPT codes. So you should have your CPT book. So let's go back to, actually it's in chapter 1. We kind of skipped over this when we did chapter 1 because I wanted you to just focus on diagnosis at that point. So we are now beginning procedure coding. Okay, these codes are for the procedures or the services that are provided to the patient. So this is the what. We've been coding the why. The diagnosis is why the patient was seen, why the procedures or why the services were rendered. Now we're actually going to focus on which services were given to the patient. Okay, so we are going to look at CPT. Okay, you're going to code very similar in that you're going to look up a key term in the alphabetical index. In CPT, the alphabetical index is in the back. So I would also encourage you to tab your CPT book just to make it easier to find your codes. Okay, these codes are also broken down by body system. Okay, so you'll see that we have essentially 6 sections. We have E&M. E&M, or Evaluation and Management, are used for every specialty, and these are the codes that you use for the physician's time to examine the patient, review the test results, develop a treatment plan, come up with a problem, those kinds of things. So every specialty will use E&M codes. That's why they're at the front. Even though they start with a 9, they're in the front. Then you're going to have anesthesia codes. These codes are for the anesthesiologist. This is not for the procedure. So if you are looking up, for example, anesthesia given for a total knee replacement, you're not going to look up the knee replacement. You're going to look up the anesthesia. Okay? Because the first thing with the CPT is you have to know which physician that you're coding for. So when you're using these anesthesia codes, you're coding for the anesthesiologist. Okay? So then you have surgery. Surgery is so big because then within the surgery section, it is broken down by body system. So you'll have integumentary, you'll have GI, respiratory, cardiovascular, etc. Then you'll have all your radiology procedures, your lab procedures, and then you have medicine. Medicine is things like immunizations, psychotherapy, physical therapy, counseling, that kind of stuff. Okay? So that's kind of a little preview to the CPT book. And then the CPT book looks like this. This is how an example of a page. So this is out of the integumentary system. Okay. So for example, the procedure that we're doing on this patient is incision and drainage of an abscess. Okay. So you're going to look up a code in the back of the book. You're going to look up incision and drainage because that's the procedure that you're doing. Okay, remember, you're coding the what you did. Category 2, so these are all what we call category 1. Category 2, okay, are performance measures. And category 3 are what we call temporary codes. Because just like with I-10 is maintained by the World Health Organization and used in multiple countries. The CPT is only used in the United States and is maintained by the American Medical Association. So as emerging technologies become available, they may assign it a category 3 or a temporary code. And then as physicians adopt them or they're used more, then they may assign them what we call a category 1 code or a permanent code. Okay? We're not going to worry too much about these. We're going to just stick with the category 1s for right now. We'll deal with more of these in 205. Okay, and then you've got some appendices and we've got modifiers. We're going to do a whole nother video on modifiers, okay? And then here's your alphabetical index. So here's an example. Okay, so this is where you really need to know your medical terminology. Okay, so let's say you're going to do take out the adenoids. Okay, so you're going to look up adenoidectomy because that's the procedure. Okay, and so within the CPT is 5 numbers. Well, category 1s are 5 numbers, sorry. Category 2, category 3 may have letters in them, but we're going to deal with category 1, which is 5 numbers. Okay? This is ICD-10 PCS, which is procedures in the inpatient. We're not going to deal with this at all. Okay? All right, so let's go over to chapter 21 in your book. Okay, so to abstract it, you just need to look up the procedure that was done. So think of things like an ectomy, an incision or drainage, a plasty. Go back to your medical terminology and think of those kinds of terms. Okay, and so walk through some of these examples. So CPT are used in outpatient facilities. Okay. So here's what we talked about, what the patient did. All right. And remember, you have to know which doctor. Okay, so we've gone over all of this. You may have more than one CPT code. Okay. Sometimes codes are out of sequence. So when you look it up in order, it'll give you a note that says it's out of sequence. All right. So let me just tell you about how these are used, okay? So when you're looking at this description, excision or destruction, open intra-abdominal tumor, cyst, or endometriosis, one or peritoneal, up to this semicolon. Okay, so this whole thing is the full description of this code. Okay, when you see it indented like this, it means the full description of this code is excision or destruction, open, blah, 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 down to the semicolon, and then you substitute largest tumor 5.1 to 10 centimeters. Okay, so anytime it's indented, the full description is up to the semicolon, and then this indented part is after the semicolon. Okay, so in this case, it's just based on size. Okay, so let's talk about some notations and symbols. See, you've seen that in I-10. Plus means it's an add-on code. If it's got a plus in front of it, it cannot be listed first. It means there's something else that goes with it, and that code has to go first. Okay? So plus means it's never first. If it talks about primary procedure, this gets a little tricky because you have to, if it's something within a different body system, then you can use it as additional procedure. But sometimes it will be included. So you just have to be careful with this, and we'll talk more about this one as we go along, okay? Bullet means it's a new. Triangle means it's changed since the last edition, okay? If it's got a star, it means you can bill it as done by telehealth. Okay, this circle with a slash means that you can't have a 51 modifier by it, and we'll talk about modifiers in the next chapter. Okay, so just go through these. This arrow in a circle is just pointing you to this insider's view, which we won't have access to those. Okay, I don't think that's going to affect you too much. Okay, so let's look at, here's an example. So we're looking at a repair. Okay, and so if we have, in this case, he's got 12 centimeters. Okay, so we've got, we're going to use this code for the first 7.5 centimeters. Okay, but since we've got 12, we need to add on the 13122, okay, because it says 5 centimeters or less. So this would give us from 8.0, well, 7.50, so I'm sorry, 7.5 up to 12.5. And so since we've got 12, we need this code and this code. Okay, so that's what I mean. This one has to be listed first. This one's listed second. Okay. So we will we'll talk more about modifiers in the next one. Next video. There are guidelines in every chapter, just like there are in I-10. So make sure that you look at those. So you will have guidelines in every section of the CPT. So here's an example of surgery guidelines. It talks about some definitions. Sometimes you can use an E&M code with a procedure, sometimes you can't. So these are just an example of guidelines. So just like with I-10, you got to look at the guidelines for every chapter to make sure that there's nothing you need to be aware of. And then there's also going to be guidelines at the code. And we'll talk about that when we get into more specific codes.